Hello everyone, it's Dylan from Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh! Video. In today's video, we are doing the top 10 unanswered questions in the Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's anime. So this is a list that I actually wrote right after the show ended, and it just completely went through the cracks. I don't know why I never actually recorded this video. So as they say, better late than never, and here we go. We are going to be getting into, in my opinion, the 10 most burning questions that we really never got fully answers to at all, in my opinion. I hope you enjoy. I hope you leave some of your thoughts down below. And without further ado, let's begin. Number 10, Phantom Luke. So in episode 27, we see Luke take on another version of himself, what we've just dubbed as Phantom Luke, and it's a really trippy, really weird duel that seems to have implications that go beyond just Luke tripping out. Like, he's literally pulled in to this almost alternate dimension to duel himself. Now, he ends up winning the duel, but what was always really weird about this duel is when Yugioh, Roman, and Gakuto go into the room to confront Luke, because he kind of went on his own earlier in the episode, you can actually see the light leaving from this like alternate dimension or plane of existence that he was dueling Phantom Luke in. Yugioh, Gakuto, and Roman even have a bit of a reaction to it, so it's not like it was just there for the audience's purpose. It's as if this was like a real phenomenon that occurred with Luke, and there was always something really creepy and weird about the Phantom Luke character. And Luke as a character had a lot of weird things going on with him, with the Paulie effect and him always talking about how he had a devil living within him. Well, Phantom Luke never really shows up again. This is never really touched on again, and it's just one of the weirder duels in Sevens that I feel we never really got actual closure on as to what the heck happened in the duel and who Phantom Luke actually is and what he was supposed to be. Number 9, who is Mr. Goa? So Mr. Goa at the beginning of Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's was portrayed as the character that we all were supposed to view as kind of like the big villain. He was this tyrannical, almost dictator in control of a major corporation called Goa that didn't speak. Nobody, including top-level employees at Goa, had no idea what he looks like, and he just had this really mysterious, threatening aura about him. Well, Mr. Goa and the identity of him and the purpose of him never really gets explained. We do see at one point that he is actually a drone that can switch from captor to captor. He at one point takes over Mimi and has pretty much full control of Mimi in a duel against Roa. We also see that once he is basically done with a body, once a body wears out, he just abandons that body, potentially like killing them and draining their life as he's in control of them. But what Mr. Goa does, who created him, how he got in this role, why he's teaming up with Otis at the end of the show, there's a lot of really weird things surrounding Mr. Goa, and I feel like we never really got answers on his character. Number 8, the runes in Otis's lair. So this is an interesting one. In episode 10, we see Luke and Gakuto examining the runes that were found in Otis's lair. Luke makes note that one of them looks like Dragius, his main ace, and he also makes note that there are 7 runes. Well, after this little exchange, these runes are never brought up again. Kind of weird considering they were found in what ended up being the main villain's lair. One of the characters compared one of the designs to his own ace monster, and 7 characters were the amount of characters that fought Otis at the end of the show. Luke, Roman, Gakuto, Yugioh, Nail, Asana, and Roa. So it almost feels like these runes were supposed to have a deeper meaning, especially because there were 7 of them and we had 7 main characters in the show. But this just seemed to get phased out of the show very early on. We never got any further explanation, and they were never brought up again. Number 7, the girl on the phone. Now, if you've been watching me for a long time, you knew I was going to bring this up, and how could I not? I really thought this character was going to be important. Obviously, she wasn't. That being said, I still think it is super weird. I'm sorry, it is, that a young girl has access to the main phone line of the president of Goha Corporation. There's something super weird about that. There just is. Now, this girl ends up saying that rush tools are cool. Mr. Goha laughs. She sounds confused, and we never really hear anything about her again. But it's one of the weirder interactions of the show. I know it's kind of become a meme on this channel, but I think if you really take a step back and think about the logistics of what's happening, a young girl has access to the direct line of Mr. Goha, the president of the company. There's something weird about that. I'm sorry, there is, and I can't help but think this character was going to be somewhat relevant, even if it was a very minor, brief thing connected to Mr. Goha, but unfortunately, we never really got an explanation to this. Number 6, the Mr. Goa Drones in the underground. So at the end of episode 55, something really weird happens. We see an empty desk that Mr. Goha normally sits at. The camera pans down, and we see what I can only describe as a massive amount of Mr. Goha's or robot suits just under the main office, which almost implies that there's like multiple versions of Mr. Goha acting at once. There's a bunch of different cylinders that contain the silhouettes of what a Mr. Goha would look like, and then we see a really devious, evil-looking one turn on that does not look like the normal Mr. Goha design that we are used to. Well, we never at any point see multiple versions of Mr. Goha flying around, and I feel like to end an episode with this and then to just never touch on it or talk about what's underneath the office of Mr. Goha was kind of weird and a little disappointing. Number 5, the Kamijo Watch. You want to talk about disappointing. This was something that was brought up at the very beginning of the show, that Luke had the Pauly effect, which could mess with electronic devices in the area. Now, Luke claimed it was because of a devil inside of him, which actually gained more credence when we saw that Phantom Luke duel. However, in episode 89, during a duel between Luke and Tiger, Luke and Tiger's grandfather describes the effect as just something being within their bloodline, and it's actually the watch that he's wearing that gives him that effect. And also because the Kamijos have some special thing within their bloodline, but I don't think the special thing was ever really acknowledged. And I can't help but feel like this was changed at some point in the show. I just feel like they were going to go in a totally different direction with it, and they just kind of ran out of time at the end, and they just had to think of something because the big Otis fight was coming up next. I don't know. This was very underwhelming, and I feel like there still are a lot of unanswered questions, like why is it just Kamijos that have this effect with the watches? Are there other families that could potentially have the same powers with these watches? It just feels like a very underwhelming answer, and there's still a lot of questions to be asked in regards to the technicality of the watches and of Luke's powers. Number 4, the CoGirls. So the entirety of Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, we had all these different CoGirls running around. Sorako, Sweets Kakako, Flash Umiko. There were all these aliens that looked similar, and for the longest time, I thought it was one character that was just playing all of these different roles, because they would like get their lines of dialogue mixed up, and in one episode, we see all of these different clothing elements of the CoGirls that we had seen so far in like a dressing room of a character. It was really weird, and it almost feels like they just made them all different characters just so Otis had enough people to match up with Yuga's team at the end of the show. But either way, whether they were meant to be one character or not doesn't really matter. The question remains the same. Who are these girls? Are they actually from a different timeline? Are they actually aliens? I know aliens are very big in Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush, the current show. They were not very big in Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s. So what's the purpose of these characters? Why were they working for Otis? It seemed like Otis hired them, but Otis then also said, you know, that's so typical of them, like he's worked with them before. A lot of weird crap going on with the CoGirls that we just never really got answers to. Number 3, the Sevens Road book. I mean, listen, I don't really know enough about the Sevens Road book, and it's a shame because that's what our main villain based all of his motivations on. Who wrote the book? What was the purpose of the book? Who were the characters in the book supposed to be, if anyone? And why was Otis so obsessed with the book? I mean, if you've watched Sevens, I'm sure you were dying to get a really good explanation on the Sevens Road book, the author of it, and why it was written and why it was so heavily connected to Otis's journey and seemingly Yuga's journey and just everything in Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, and yet we just never got answers to what this book was. And I'm sorry, but this is a burning unanswered question of mine, and it's the only one that does not have to do with a character in the top 3. Number 2, Otis. Probably not good if your main villain is a massive unanswered question in and of itself. Who is Otis behind the mask? What was his actual motivations and reasonings for finding this book? He manipulated Yugioh all throughout his journey, but it seems like his motivations changed many different times over, and by the end of the show, in episode 91, the penultimate episode, Otis said that he created the first form of dueling, the dueling before Rush, but it got away from the children, so that's why he wanted to reinstall Rush duels. But then he read the Sevens Road book, and the Sevens Road book basically insinuated that all dueling needs to end, and he needed the children's help to end dueling. I mean, I'm not even kidding. That's almost like verbatim what he said, but none of it makes sense. It doesn't make sense at all. Who is Otis? What is Otis? Why is Otis? Why did he do all of the stuff that he did? His motivations, his actions, they just don't make sense. And it was very, very underwhelming. And it was very much tied to that Sevens Road book, which I just feel like those 10 lost episodes to COVID really murdered the execution of both of those elements. And it's a shame, but they're very high up on this list for me. The number 1 unanswered question of Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's, who is the character at the end of the show? I mean, come on, guys. When a Yu-Gi-Oh! Show ends with the main character disappearing for 2 years, and then another character returning to Earth 2 years later in a time skip, smiling, and then not showing that character, of course, that is going to be the biggest unanswered question of Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's. Now, lucky for us, that question very well may get answered in the current Yu-Gi-Oh! Show, Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush. I actually think it is going to. But who is the guy in the ship? Is it our Yuga? Is it Yuga from a different timeline? Is it Otis? Probably not, but I don't know. It really could be anyone, and that is super compelling. It is one of the best Yu-Gi-Oh! Cliffhangers that we've left off on, and I am really hopeful it gets answered in Go Rush, but until it does, it will be the biggest unanswered question in the Yu-Gi-Oh! 7's anime. And guys, that wraps it up. Please let me know your thoughts on this list, and let me know if you agree with some of my rankings, if you disagree, and what were some big questions that you thought we would get answers to that we just never really did. Let me know down below in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you down there, and I hope you have an amazing day. Take care, guys.